Thanks a million, Maeve. Just delighted to be here. I unfortunately have a law degree, a BCL, not a BCom, so I feel slightly out of place in this panel. But delighted to be here. I see Fergal work in front of me, so as well as obviously the Moore School, I have to mention this is the PwC Theatre, where he said he'd kill me. Let's start. I think I'll start with you, Gareth. What did getting your BCom mean to you, and what was it like doing your BCom in UCD?
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. So I actually qualified in 95. I did international commerce, which was like the BCom, but you also do a year abroad on Erasmus. So my time was spent in Seville in Spain. To be honest, like what I learned here in college wasn't so much about the deep subject matter expertise, because I mean it's a broad business degree, but also the way things changed so dramatically when I qualified. If you think about it, I qualified in 95. The internet and the mobile phone was became mainstream in earnest around 95, 96. So the 20 years in technology I've had, you know, it's a bit of a cliche these days to say, our kids will have jobs that don't exist now and that we don't understand. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of happened to me, you know. Yeah. I mean, the companies I've worked for, like Facebook and PayPal, didn't exist. Yeah. They're some of the largest companies in the world now. The products and services didn't exist. So, you know, and there wasn't much technology in the business course at the time. I think it was called MIS. I don't even remember what it stood for. I remember I wasn't very good at it. Wasn't very technically proficient. Still haven't.
Right. You know that.
But yeah. So it was more about the experience. And the one thing I'd say is that the thing that probably prepared me best from a world in global tech was actually the year abroad. In Seville, frankly, because of all the experiences and, you know, learning to be independent and communicate with people there. So, you know, amazing memories. Most of the memories are just an amazing time, network, friends, the year abroad. But nothing could have prepared me for the product services companies that didn't even exist when I qualified.
Philip?
It's funny because three of the people that most inspired me during my BCom here are actually here today. Oh. And so I'll line this up. So in the third year in particular for me is where it all started to come together. MIS, Management Information Systems. I failed at the end of my first year, I'm happy to say. I had to come back from, actually it was Berlin, putting headstones on graves for my summer job, so that Paul Kidney would get me through MIS at the end of first year to keep me in the program. I too struggled. I also had a career in technology. I don't know how that works. So third year for me was where you would focus in on subjects that were of particular interest to you. So for me, first of all, Frank Bradley and marketing and international marketing, and I just remembered Kotler was the book. This is 40 years ago, and the 4 Ps, if they still apply. That's what I took with me from my marketing classes, and they were very fundamental to my thinking as an entrepreneur. And the other aspect was, in 1979 was the first year that Frank Roach opened up the enterprise development. So there was about 15 or 20 of us in the little room, 30 or even less these times, and the idea of how you could use entrepreneurship. What the hell is that? And what does it take to be an entrepreneur and the risk? And we did business plan competitions. I became a technology entrepreneur later on in life. And so there's absolutely no doubt that what we were doing and thinking about and learning about was absolutely relevant to my path. And the third is John Teeling. And if ever there's a character, and when I see this room, and I remember him flowing down in Theatre P or Theatre L, whichever we were in, and he would flow in and take over the whole room and tell us with great joy, fun, and excitement about business. Joy, fun, and excitement about business, and would make us laugh. And so I wanted to get involved in the joy, fun, and so those three men all had huge impact on me during, and so did my BCom, and for those very reasons.
Wow, that's really interesting. Jane Ann?
It's interesting that you mentioned John Teeling, because I actually remembered that lecture very vividly as well from my time, so still going in 2002, I think. But for me, I think with commerce, it gave me such kind of a solid foundation, really. I really enjoyed, I've made friends that I still have very close to today. We had a great class, but in terms of the breadth of actually the courses that we were able to do here, I think it's actually kind of followed me throughout my career to date. Whenever I've gone, I've worked very much primarily in the humanitarian sector, but also here in Ireland as director. I was leading in fundraising, so everything was coming back to me that, from my marketing years, doing the marketing courses here. I was very much a reluctant accountant, let's say, when I went and did it after the BCom and after the Masters in Smurfit. But I remember when I was going and studying accounting at night, I was like, oh, this all is very familiar, actually. Yeah, I remember this. A few years ago, we all touched on all of these different elements. So I found that throughout the years after I left here, that you still, that knowledge that you gained while I was here, it actually kept on creeping back in and was very much, I suppose, stood to me over the years.
Great. Breach?
Well, I'll go back a bit to the beginning and say in 1950s, Ireland had a very different educational landscape. There were, not everybody finished primary school, not many at secondary school, and indeed in 1950 there were 9,700 students at universities in Ireland compared with 60% who go today. As Maeve alluded to, I was born in the edge of the Burn, almost on the edge of the world. And there were no transport links. And besides, it wasn't economically feasible for me to go to university because at that time a career choice was more based on means than abilities. Some years later, and I would congratulate UCD on being the first university in Ireland to introduce a night programme. And there I started. So UCD was a very important part of my journey. It opened up a whole new world for me. It gave me a love of learning, a love of education, and it's just about 18 months ago that I completed my Chartered Director. So all over the years I've attended for part-time programs in the US and internationally. Networking, and still today, is hugely important. And of course, in my home, UCD was very important, as my late husband was a graduate of UCD, and so were 8 of my 10 stepchildren.
Wow.
No, but a wonderful place that a great learning journey, opening up a whole new world. And of course, in the course of my career, I have encouraged many and supported many, financially or otherwise, to attend university, to attend colleges that suited their ability.
Just before I bring Angus in, I'm an interviewer. You mentioned you married a man who had 10 children. Mm-hmm. Did you have any thoughts about that before you married him?
Not at all. I did. I wasn't going to any. I wasn't going to any.
Well done. Good for you. Angus, your memories and what it's meant for you, the BCom.
Well, Miriam, first of all, we never had a lecture hall like this when I was there in the old arts block. This is light years beyond. And I think we all have to thank the Moore family and Angela for its tremendous generosity in the philanthropy family to bring something like this to UCD. For me, UCD, there's fantastic memories, of course, from the academic side studying the BCom. There was one lecturer that stood out in my mind, a guy called Tony Horahan, who was a professor, part-time professor. He was in business too. And I always remember reading my final BCom paper in strategy, and it said, as Juan Bautista galloped across the Andalusian plain on his fine Apollonian stallion, he contemplated the decision before him. I say that because lecturers need to engage with the student population to inspire them a bit. And not every student will be inspired by every lecturer, but you'd hope that every student over the course of 3 or 4 years does get that inspiration, that business is not just a means to an end, it's so much of your life is there. And for me in UCD, what Commerce really taught me is that, look, you're responsible for yourself now, and that means you have to work hard. You really have to work hard if you're going to get on. No one's going to do it for you. And that was a lesson you learn when you get into university and you're in your second, third year and it's very competitive. And that's the lesson I think that more than anything stood to me is you just have to work extremely hard to get anywhere in this life, and no one owes you anything out there.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah, it's true. Philip, I'll start with you this time. I suppose we're in this beautiful space today. How important do you think, when you look at living, learning and working into the future, how important do you think it is that, you know, the future students and the current ones have spaces like this to develop?
Okay, well, I also think back in our day we would share the arts block and those big lecture theatres. What I noticed when I come here to the original Quinn School and this school here, it's much more set up for intimate and interactive. That's the first thing that I noticed. And whether it's the whoops, very good. I've done it once, so I'll try it twice. Whether it's the smaller theatres along the wall on the side, or I walk through this area, it actually, to me, looks like a Facebook campus is what I think I'm looking at. And when I walk down, I think the furniture is fabulous. But this environment, this here is a multi-purpose room that's going to be used in multiple ways. I see there's an entrepreneurship and innovation centre, there's a media centre, and etc. So I think what it is, it's very much 21st century. I think the students, you know, that get in here, and I got here skimmed in by 1 point back then, and lucky to stay in. So, but to those that get into this institution, get to go to the BCom, get into this growing network also of people out in the world, whether it's alumni, etc. So they're spoilt. I hope they appreciate it. They've worked hard to get their spot.
Yeah.
This is state of the art. I mean, I live in the US, and this is as good as it gets anywhere. Absolutely as good as it gets anywhere. And UCD and the BCom should be proud of that, and the students should be appreciative.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. And Gareth, as you know, Philip said, it's very like Facebook. I mean, you're blessed, aren't you? Because you work in these extraordinary spaces, but this is it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we are. No, and it does have a kind of Silicon Valley vibe when you come in, all the collaborative spaces, the open spaces, all that kind of thing. And, you know, it's become a bit of a cliche, you know, about free food and foosball machines and, you know, bean bags and all the rest of it. But really, that's just a trend of sort of the socialization of the workplace, you know, that it's more like what your life is outside of what you'd like it to be and with your friends. And in Facebook, it's not just about the spaces, it's also about how we communicate, you know? And I think that's going to be important here too. Like, so in Facebook, for example, we use Facebook, or a version of it called Workplace, as an enterprise tool to communicate. And it's a very millennial way of communicating in an organization because, you know, companies like Facebook aren't very hierarchical, okay? I mean, every company is hierarchical, every family is, but it's pretty flat and it's not all top-down communication. Or when it is, the employees feel like they want to have a say in it as well. So for example, when I communicate to our employees on Workplace, the version of Facebook, about a decision I've made or something that's happening, it's not top-down. I mean, there's comment fields, okay? So they're going, why? Have you considered this? Can I see the data? Yeah. It can be pretty annoying, okay? I mean, it's sometimes you want to be more dictatorial and just go, because I said so, like my dad said. But actually, you know, they want to understand, they want to feel part of it, they want complete transparency. So it's not just about the spaces, it's how you communicate with them as well that I think is, you know, is bringing the workplace forward.
That's really interesting, I think. Do you demote people who are the trickiest? I'm only joking.
I have a special list. So.
Breach, in terms of like so much of your life has been surrounded by beautiful things and retail. Do you think the space, something like this, matters in how people develop both now and in the future?
Of course it does, and it's, you know, going on what's said before, because really it's all about, isn't it, growing up in the new social environment. You know, it's about problem solving, learning by doing, experimentation, collaboration, and this environment should give a growth mindset, and also should make us conscious of sustainability, the environment, and as Gareth said, the importance of communication. And of course, state of the art. You know, state of the art with just wonderful infrastructure, all of the things that contribute to the economy that we live in. And while, you know, artificial intelligence is in a changing world is important, but I believe, and it's challenging, but I believe culture is probably more challenging than, and we have to learn as opposed to top down, you know, the educators from bottom up in terms of that cultural skills, cultural change.
Jane Ann?
Well, I think what's interesting is that with my final year in the BCom, we actually moved to the Quinn School. So I got a bit of both.
Yeah,
it was just that
great.
kind of cusp of change, really. So we had the 2 years, in the big lecture hall, in with the arts. And then to come here, we really, from my class, it was really exciting because it was, we basically felt we had the run of the place, really. It was all these smaller classrooms. You could already really sense the change in that kind of learning environment. Coming here and seeing actually now we're in a class of 25. There's no longer anywhere to hide. And you also then really developed a lot of what I consider key skills in terms of presenting, getting up, being able to do a lot of group work. I think when we started doing all the group work, we were looking at ourselves going, so what are we supposed to be doing here? We're not very used to this. We're used to being able to sit in a lecture and not kind of just absorb the information. And I think that it was really, for me, that was creating that kind of dynamic environment was actually really beneficial, and it really helped that kind of real learning and really getting to know each other and really being able to kind of work with others as well.
Great.
Miriam, it's a long way away from Earlsfort Terrace or doing the exams on the RDS where you were sure to be assigned a rockety table.
Well, good point, actually, Breed. Angus, finally, on just the importance of, I suppose, environment and space like we have here today.
The environment is very important. I mean, it speaks to the student of the quality of the institution, the expectation of the student. Look, we are putting this on in front of you. Now, you have the facility, you have the student, you have the lecturing body as well. They're the three components that have to come together. And so clearly, we have the space here. The students will arrive. And I think it's very important that as we teach today, and the world has changed. So, what was good 30 years ago isn't good today. Change is definitely a constant. And so at points when I was in university, it was an extension of the Leaving Cert. You come in, we were talking about it, Jane Ann, the acetates that go up on the projector, and you go off to the library and you do your notes. And that gives you a level of knowledge, of course, which you must have, and you must deeply understand whatever subject matter you're in. You have to know more about it than anyone else you're in competition with, effectively. But then there's so many more skills around that to enhance that, and that's where relationship building is so important, and gaining people's trust. And how do you do that in this type of setting to prepare students for things like that, about how to engender trust in relationships, because that's so vital in every aspect of your life. And a very important point as well is learn to speak. You've got to learn to speak. Nobody wants to hire someone who's talking to their shoe, who is afraid to look someone in the eye. I think it's something that misses a lot from Irish graduates that we hire. You have to be there's no question that they're as smart as anyone. There's no question that they're able to deal with the task at hand. But you must be able to stand up. If you want to be seen, stand up. If you want to be heard, speak up. If you want to be respected, maybe shut up. But I think it's very important as we go forward, the students we produce, that they're able to speak their mind. And it doesn't take them 10 years of people pulling and pushing them to get in there and say, once you've done your work, if you've worked hard, you should be confident in yourself. And the university should bring that out. I mean, the university is instilling this knowledge into the people. It's more of a soft skill, but as you say, we have spaces out here now where public speaking can be done. I know you can't devote a whole lecture hall because there's pressures to let every student have their turn presenting. But in smaller focus groups, I think it's a crucial skill to have in the world today.
You agree with that, yeah?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I mean, we're talking about workspaces and the future of work and looking forward and what it's going to look like in the future. I was thinking about that for today and talking to some colleagues. I think the biggest impact in how we live and play, but especially work, is going to be virtual and augmented reality, okay? I work in a company that's on the pushing edge of these technologies. We have a company called Oculus. Actually, our office in Cork is developing research and technology around virtual and augmented reality. This is going to be the biggest game changer to how we work, and I'm not talking 50 years science fiction, I'm talking the next 5 to 10 years. I had the privilege of seeing the latest technology on this a couple of weeks ago, the latest beta. It's the most mind-blowing technology I've ever seen in my life, bar none. You're not just, at the moment, the use case for virtual reality is hardcore gamers, okay? Uber geeks, the kind of people who passed MIS, Philip, not like you and me, who have these machines on their head. But the way it's going forward is it's going to be much more collaborative. You're going to be, for example, in a work situation with lifelike avatars in a room fully reconstructed with data and holograms around you. Again, 5 to 10 years, not 50 years, 5 to 10 years. Data and holograms around you. You can step out of it and grab your cup of coffee and come back in. I mean, the impact on this, if you think about it, is travel. I mean, I've spent half my life traveling around the world. That is going to be not eliminated, but greatly reduced, and all the other benefits and productivity and, carbon footprints, etc. You can do these things from your bed and your gym jams if you want. Your commute and all the rest of it massively reduced. Even not just service and management meetings, but even operating hardcore machinery from that environment. So the benefits of this are huge. I think a lot of people think of virtual reality, again, with the kind of solo immersive thing. It's going to be collaborative and social.
What does that mean? I'm just interested in, say, when I leave here to go across to RT. So what would it mean, say, in 10, you're saying in 5 to 10 years' time? What does it mean for people even in KPMG?
So imagine your day now. You mentioned you had a primetime meeting at
11.
Soon, yeah. At 11 o'clock.
I'm always late.
Rushing across the city. Okay, that's handy. It's not a good example. Across the road. Someone else who has a meeting in town rushing across the road.
Yeah.
Forget that commute. Forget going, in my case, to Silicon Valley. You will be able to plot yourself into that meeting with lifelike avatars in a room completely reconstructed. It's a truism that there's no substitute for face-to-face, right, for relationships. But believe that gap is narrowing to such a degree that this is going to change the way we live and work in the future. And as I say, not for your 50-year time capsule, but really, really soon.
And one last thing before I bring Philip in this, but that moment in a meeting where you catch someone's eye and you look at them and you either believe something they're saying or not. We'll always need that, surely.
Well, you will appear lifelike in the meeting, and it'll be reflected. Yeah, I'm telling you, I was doing it last week, and already you and I can pick things up and pass things to each other, tell expressions from our faces.
Okay.
It's absolutely incredible.
That's amazing. Philip, you live in Austin, in Texas, so you're at the cutting edge as well of everything that's happening in the future. Listening there both to Gareth, and what do you see being the immediate changes which will change our
world?
world?
I wanted to augmented virtual reality, absolutely, yes, and they're at the forefront of it. And it's so here's the thing, when you're talking about going into the future, we have no frame of reference for it, so it's difficult to understand it, it's difficult to imagine it, and hence the question, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take an example and just connect a few dots. So today in Austin, Texas, I can take my Tesla car, I unplug it so it's electric. So how many of us drove today an electric car? And how many of us will drive here in 5 years' time an electric car? And 10. So electric car we think is innovative. It's here today. There's 3 different models. There's thousands of them running all over the road. So I get to the top of my road, and inside the Tesla today, there's the iPad. And I tell it which shopping center I want to go to and press go. And it'll take me there today. My only requirement is to sit in the seat and tap the wheel every so often. When you hire them in Silicon Valley. That's all I have to do. Changing lanes, the car's doing it itself. So that's already today. That's not augmented reality. That's today. Sit in your car, you're going to the shopping centre. If there's a dual carriageway and somebody stops in front of you, it'll change lane, it'll go right, it'll get to the front gate of the... So that's today. So then I go, wow, okay. Oh, hang on, now drones are delivering pizzas and Amazon are delivering via drone. Now that is not yet today in Austin, but we're absolutely on the edge of it. So the drone is going to arrive in our back garden. So where I get excited,
right.
Well, it's going to happen. It's absolutely inevitable. The things we're talking about are absolutely inevitable. And for my sins as a technologist in the financial markets, being out on the leading edge and trying to apply artificial intelligence to models that predict financial markets and stuff, we were pretty mad back then, but that's okay. So where it all leads to is personal drones. That gets me really excited. So there's 5 companies today, including Larry Page of that other company beginning with G, investing in one of the... So we are going to be strapping into our personal drones. There's 5 of them that are absolutely flying already today. Is it mass transport? No, not in the next 3 to 5 years. But these things are inevitable. This is the new work environment. So the question for the student that comes out and graduates is, where on the spectrum of this rate of change do you want to plug in, and how do you want to engage? That's the only question, because the bus has already left town years ago.
It's fascinating. Same with Gareth. Jane Ann? How do you see where we'll be? Obviously, they're both focusing on the technology and the technological immediate changes. How do you see how the world is going to change in terms of how we live and work?
Well, I think it's always, particularly with an organisation like Médecins Sans Frontières, one of the things that we're looking at very much at the moment is the kind of global redistribution or global distribution. I think Maeve wrote about it in her paper, and it's around the fact that, we are an organisation with 33,000 employees. I was saying 6% of our workforce is actually South Sudanese. And yet we are, very centric in Europe in terms of headquarters. And now when we look towards the future, this is, the world is changing. And we're probably not at the cusp on the technological front, I would say, as an international NGO, but very much in terms of the expectations of people, of the expectations of our patients, the expectations of our staff. We are in a situation now where in our hospitals, whether it's in Helmand or elsewhere, our patients are actually criticizing us on Facebook and saying, hang on a second, I went and I had to wait for an hour to see a doctor and they left me without any antibiotics. And, so there's that in itself, but it's really that there's very much, we are now being held to account far more so by our staff, by our patients, and we need to see how we can actually I would say, kind of redistribute the power balance a little bit and move away from the traditional models of aid delivery, of aid care, and actually see how we can actually engage far more with those we work with those that we actually assist. Now that the world is becoming far more networked, and I laugh, I think when I went to Darfur back in 2008, I was working, I had a number of colleagues from Sudan, and they all had 3 mobile phones. I was like, oh, okay, this is, this wasn't what I was expecting, and I think there is, that is the reality today, and I think that we need to really embrace embrace really the staff that we have, the global workforce that we have in terms of, and translate that into how we can actually deliver better humanitarian care.
Just what Jane Ann said there, Miriam, is very important as well. The world is changing. The demographics, where commerce is actually occurring, is changing. The days of the Atlantic world are limited. The world, in our business, we track where travel is occurring. Travel follows business economic activity. And we show these charts, we go back 30 years, and red just signifies where the traffic is. 30 years ago, it was all around Europe, the North Atlantic. There was Japan, Australia, but it was all around the North Atlantic. Every 5 years then, as you show it, we just show more and more and more going east and going north-south. That's very, very different part of the world, that it's not just a northern hemisphere world anymore. Southern hemisphere is very important too. And to give you an example, today, 24% of everything the biggest exporter in the world makes, which is Boeing, goes to China. 24%, 25% of everything Airbus makes, 25% of everything General Electric
That's
makes.
amazing. Actually.
That's where it's going. And so when we talk about preparing our students from this institution, you have to be relevant, you have to understand that the world is changing. And just reading case studies that are 20 years old of how business was done in the US and in Europe, that's just not what these students are going to face. They're going to face something extraordinarily different. And that's where I do agree that technology is a huge role to play. But when you go to China, when you go to Vietnam, when you go to Brazil, when you go to Mexico, you have to be there in person as well. Of course, it will limit it, Gareth. I get it that it will eliminate some of it, but there really is no substitute for looking someone in the eye when you're going to commit hundreds of millions of dollars to them or billions of dollars to them. You've got to see them, and you've got to be prepared for that a bit as well. And I suppose, we talk a lot about how the world is changing, and that's fine, but how are we preparing our educators for that change? How's the university going to do that to make the most of this amazing facility? Because it's great having a Premier League football pitch, but if the team aren't prepared or trained for it, then it's all for naught.
Good point. Breach in terms of immediate
I think
change.
it's talent is hugely important. I think that's what Angus is alluding to as well, in terms of continuous education, continuous improvement, preparing for the global and digital world that we live in. And the customer, whatever business we're in, expects a platform for discovery, a platform of excitement, a platform for experimentation, and delivery here and now.
Really
And leveraging technology is obviously important, but I think the whole question of cultural change linked with technology is a very important part. And, in terms of, we talk about the East, entirely different doing business there than in the Western world.
Yeah.
So how we cope with that in terms of cultural change skills.
Yeah,
Can I pick up
of
on
course,
something there that both the guys said in terms of demographics and the changing kind of globalization of the workforce, whether it be going east or just our workforces in general being a lot more international. I see that in the university already. When I went to college, there was a few foreign students. I mean, now there's so many foreign students. At Facebook here in Ireland, we just crossed in the summer over 100 nationalities working for us there, right? I think it's the most diverse office in Ireland by nationality. And of course, nationality is a proxy for all sorts of other nationalities. Now, I know Facebook's unique in terms of its global platform and will always be very heavily, but every company is kind of moving in that direction. I think, I could be wrong on this stat, but I read, I think, in an IDA publication that 19% of the workforce in Ireland is non-Irish now. So every company is going to have this hugely diverse workforce of nationality and every other kind of piece. And one of the things in the future of working, and I guess here in the college as well, is getting used to that and learning how to deal with it. It's wonderful. I consider it a massive privilege of my job, but it's not easy, trying to adapt to all the cultural differences. We have a very large Muslim community, so it's, it goes, for example, from the logistical things like, we need 4 toasters, a halal, a kosher, or this and that. We need a prayer room, a washroom for Ramadan. All sorts of, the much harder side of it, we won't get into it, but is the inclusion of these diverse people. And, as I say, we have 100 nationalities, but it's moving more and more that way. And that's another trend in the future of
really
work, especially here in Ireland, which was always so homogenous for so long.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Philip, in terms of graduates, what's the most common question you get from young people, from graduates? Like what?
One of the ways, this is ridiculous. Do you remember 14 years ago, you came back to Dublin and you spoke to the BCom class and you said, I said, no.
No, I don't.
I don't. But no, you said such and such, and it meant something to me. That was the important part. So what's the most common question that a graduate would ask? I think graduates are interested in your story. What did you do with it afterwards? So, tell my story on the technology side and tell my story on the philanthropy side. And I try to speak to them. I think I want to speak about my story, I want to talk to them about purpose and passion. To me, it's really important that. So that's the question maybe I want them to ask me about is so we come out of the university and we have this skeletal, we have this academic information and the social exchange. So what we have to do is then put the meat and the bones and basically experience. So what I learned over the years is you can't teach experience. So I really encourage the graduates to either find a mentor and or get online. There's so many phenomenal teachers, looking at those in the light green t-shirts, the teachers, online, videos, downloads, podcasts, my goodness, beyond the classroom, there is a mass of education that's available. The purpose and passion, do that which you love. That's, do what you love and love what you do. And then in terms of the passion, a friend of mine wrote a book and it's called It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For. And that's what I'd want to shake in the shoulders of every graduate is it's not what you sell, it's not what you're marketing, it's not the company, it's what you stand for. What's your purpose? What are you standing for? And particularly in this environment of social entrepreneurship and impact investing, conscious capitalism, we really can do business for good. Those are the things maybe I'd like them to ask me about, or I'd like to talk to them about.
Yeah.
The other question that they do ask me is after you sell for so much money, what's it like? Which is...
and what do you say?
Very simply, everything changed and nothing changed. And I get asked the question often.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Everything changed.
Everything changed and nothing changed.
I assume you worry less.
You worry, yes, and you just apply yourself to different things. In our case, we took what we learned in business and applied it to humanitarian aid and poverty and other things. You're not worried about paying the mortgage that month.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff that comes up that you have to handle.
Yeah, that you can. Yeah. Breed in terms of, because I know you're constantly talking, you could go to Marion and help speak to students there. What's your key message? If it's not maybe, what's the key question that graduate asks you? What's your key message you would give to young graduates?
Yeah, the key message would be, I'd say, is be true to yourself. Show courage, take initiative, be optimistic, respect and value differences, be aware of right from wrong, always do the right thing. Don't be clothed in power and status. Recognize, that it is, I suppose, love and encouragement that inspire success and that allow people to be fulfilled the world over. So that would be kind of my advice to graduates.
They're both great.
I think
I'll have to aim it, yeah.
I would also say to them, and I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said it, I'd like to be thoroughly used up when I die. The harder I work, the longer I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a bright torch that I've got hold of for the moment, and I want it to shine as brightly as possible before I hand it on to future generations. I would try and give that message, and that's a good motto in taking that from what he said.
Yeah. I'm going to bring you to RT with me now at 11. Angus, I suppose, what do you think the most important thing you would say to a young graduate is, rather than what's the key question they often ask, maybe, or both?
The key thing is you've got to first, I came back to it a bit, but you have to work hard. But when you work hard, then you should have confidence in yourself and be brave. Opportunity will come. Don't be afraid. Go for it. Take it on. There's always a reason not to go through that open door. But you've got to go. And if you've worked hard and you're confident, you'll find that you can do it. And you just have to have that ambition, if you will, whatever term you want to use. But you can't be afraid. I think that's what I would say, Miriam, but that's premised on the fact that you've worked very hard, you're doing the right thing. But once you have that opportunity, take it, grab it with both hands. Don't ever die wondering. Go and get it.
Yeah, really good. Jane Ann?
I do actually get a lot of graduates coming to me to ask about getting into the kind of humanitarian or aid sector. And I think that what I often say is that it's like, I do think I think I'm an example of doing what I love and actually really following what your passion is. But also that it's quite a lot of hard work to get there, and that you need to have you need to have a real skill to offer, so that it's no longer a case of, okay, the doors will be open and you can go in, and, if you're willing to help, there'll be a job there for you. It's actually a very competitive environment, and you have to kind of work backwards and say, okay, what is the skill that I can offer to this organization, to this type of work, and then work back from there. And I think that was really, when I started, I think when I left commerce, and I was like, oh, what will I do now? I kind of want to get into the aid sector, and but I don't really know where to start. And someone said to me, either get a profession or get on a plane and go to Africa. So I said, okay, maybe I'll go with the profession route first, and I think that gave me the opening to go in and to be able to progress. And as I said, I was a bit of a reluctant accountant, but I kind of, I was just being able to use that skill to be able then to broaden out, to go in basically, and then broaden out into more general management.
Great. Gareth?
Yeah, I think the most frequently asked question I get is from graduates or kids is what do I need to do or study to get a job in tech? A lot of them want to work in tech. They come into, I had my 11-year-old daughter and her friends into the office the other day, and they love it because there's free food, free sweets, there's Instagram boosts. I give them a go with the virtual reality. They think that's all I do all day. So they say, what do I need to study or do to get a job here? And it's actually a really hard question because you instinctively go to the crutch of STEM subjects and computer science, and we do need more of that. But it's actually also, this notion of the jobs of the future don't exist at the moment. How do you prepare someone for a future that's uncertain? That the job. I think we don't have that many engineers in Ireland. It's human rights lawyers, data scientists. You name it, and a lot of these roles won't exist. So I don't have a great answer for them other than the STEM one. But I do typically say to them, and it's a lot of what people talk about future of the work is, make sure whatever you're studying, how you learn, you're able to adapt quickly, have curiosity, have agility with speed, because that's what's going to be, that's what's valued already in our company and what's going to be increasingly valued in companies in the future.
Really interesting. Of course, you're not accidental here. The five of you are incredibly successful. Not everyone in your years and your classes probably became as successful as you have. You spoke earlier, Philip, about passion and purpose. But what do you think is the key reason you have been so successful? Is it because you married both of them? Was there a bit of luck along the way? Did you get help from people, you know, who just gave you confidence early? If you were to look back, what's the key to your success?
A couple of things. I think Inga speaks about hard work. My wife said that I was a workaholic. I'm in denial. I deny it. I think I was just very focused on something I was very curious about. So I think the first thing is that if you have a passion and a curiosity and an interest, my thing was, could you take computer models and predict financial markets? And I remember the first time I was looking at a squiggly line, which I consider to be a stock price, on a screen. I was working at a UK military defence software place, and I was looking at the squiggly line, and I was saying to them, what are you doing? Oh, we're trying to predict where that squiggly line is going next. And I said, wow, that's amazing. What is it? Well, it's a heat-seeking missile. And I said, a heat-seeking missile? Yeah, we're trying to predict whether this missile should go up or go down next. I said, wow, but what if that was a stock price? And they said, quote, Berber, would you stop that? The Ministry of Defence, they're not interested in trading stocks and shares. But that's what put me on my path, the curiosity, because you build computer models, and that's what we were doing, and then generating, could you buy and sell pork bellies based on buy-sell signals coming out of a computer model? So I think that's the first thing. I had a passion and a curiosity around it. Most of the time I was knocking my head against the wall. And the other thing is very, very clear to me. I was very blessed, and I was very lucky. I was very blessed, and I was very lucky. And if I give you just one example, my company called Cybercore, which I discovered if it was an internet company, would get overvalued. So I changed it from Cybercore to cybercore.com and made it available for sale and took it to the investment bankers. 3 weeks before the internet bubble burst, in February 2000, we sold Cybercore for internet dollars. Had it been a month later, so by the grace of God go I, and I'm really clear about that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And your own innate genius and brilliance. Breed, your
I
point
think
of view?
work ethic is really important,
Okay.
and I could say that, it was the hiring the best talent, and they will teach you what to do. I think that's really quite important in terms of having a good leadership people that empower all the way down. You build trust, innovation, provide newness, provide investment, and recognize that it's the people all around you who really run the business.
Fantastic. Gareth?
Yeah, well, I've always been just really attracted by tech. Again, not the technology, I'm not an engineer, but in the innovation and opportunity behind it, right from the early days. Like I started after college, I went into brand management in Irish distillers, a very, I suppose, traditional job. And in '99, I left for an Irish tech startup. And I actually had the opposite timing of Philip in that. I joined, packed it all in, went in day one, and next week was the crash. And we had to raise money like 4 or 5 times just to stay alive. And then I got into this, and even now, even now, if you think about all the the techlash and the problems with big tech and even Facebook specifically, I still find it massively intellectually stimulating.
Yeah.
I still find it whether it's cryptocurrencies or VR we're getting into. I tell my wife, if you think the last 8 years of roller coaster, it's not getting any better. I'm massively intellectually stimulated by that. So I guess it comes back to the sort of cliche of sort of curiosity. That's what's driving me on.
Fascinating. Jane Ann?
I think from my side, it was really around grasping a lot of the opportunities that came my way. I think there's an element of luck, in terms of, different opportunities that came up for me, but really not being, I suppose, being quite determined and going for them, as they came up, and to see actually there's an opening here to learn something different, to apply my knowledge in a different way, to see how I can actually, I have all these ideas about what we can do better, about how we can actually build the Irish office up and actually just go for it, and not to assume that somebody else has all the answers, you know, but actually to believe in yourself and say, okay, this is, I have some ideas, I feel that I can actually put this into practice. And I think I was fortunate, or I am fortunate, to work for an organisation that also values that, and it's very much kind of the hands-on and being able to see the fruits of your action. And I think that that's something that really, that is...
Angus, yes, Brie?
Maybe I would like to add that, you know, I'm sure that UCD has influenced us all, you know, over the years in some way or other. And, you know, we have to remember the part played by Cardinal John Henry Newman, one of the greatest minds of the 19th century, soon to be canonized. You know, it is his ethos and founding spirit, I think, that feeds this university. And certainly the nuggets in his wisdom that I would have been influenced by would have been, say, ability is sexless. Growth is the only evidence of life. And then if you wait until, if you wait until tomorrow, you know, until everything's absolutely right, you'll never get it done.
Yeah.
So these were, and I'm sure they're all parts of our learning journey, influenced by Cardinal John Henry Newman.
Very good point, Breach. Angus,
So, Miriam, the question is, what are the things you felt that pushed you to where you are?
how come you became so successful?
So, there's a few things. I mentioned hard work is an obvious one, but you need a bit of inspiration and you need a bit of luck. I started my career in KPMG, but shortly after I started there, I was sent to what was then called GPA, Guinness Peak Aviation. And AirCap today is GPA, it's the same company. We did a lot along the way. But at that time, the company was on its knees. It had been the first huge Irish success. It collapsed in 1992. But the gentleman here today who was my first inspirational leader was Patrick Blaney, who's here today, who ran GPA and turned it around after Tony Ryan had to leave the company. And that was a small company in the west of Ireland, but billions and billions of dollars. And he gave you that feeling we couldn't be beaten. There's no reason why we can't be the best in the world. There's no reason, if you work hard enough, why you cannot be number one in the world. And that's a very important thing to have in you. And you need luck. You need things, opportunity to present themselves. You need to, you know, carpe diem. You've got to go for it. But, and then along your career, you need a couple of people just to reinforce that always, to say to you, go for it. Don't be afraid. Because some challenges, if you're going to be number one in the world, and there's no reason why you can't. And that's ambition we should say to our students. You can be the best in the world. But you need a few people along the way just to remind you you can get it done. And that's very important. I think, you know, as anyone here is dealing with young people, you know, trying to encourage them, just tell them, you know, people always say, oh, I can't do it. No, you can. Like, why not? Yeah. Go for it. And I think that's a very important thing.
I want to add to that, particularly to those that are recently graduated, etc. So when I graduated all those years ago, I got a job over in the UK immediately. So I was working with Ford Motor Company. It was my first job. Did the graduate recruitment thing, and over I went. Oh, and the parish I'm Jewish, by the way, and the parish priest from UCD said, Berber, don't go over there and sell your soul. That's what I had. Ring it in my head. The parish priest at UCD said, don't sell your soul. I'm going to Ford Motor Company. So here's the thing, I got over there and I thought that all those English graduates, I'm looking at all the young ones at the back, that they'd be brighter, smarter, sharper. They are not. And for you to go to an institution like this, to get in here and stay in here despite failing MIS at the end of first year, wow, the people that emerge from this environment are world class. They are worthy of the premiership soccer field. The people that come out, so you know, the Irish tend to used to have this chip in their shoulder. It doesn't apply. Drop the story, move on. And secondly, the lucky moments where those things happen, where there's just opportunities. I can think of phone calls, people that ask me, would you like, that have changed my life. Why did they phone me that day? Why did they invite me to do that? I have no idea. But when those opportunities knock on the door, don't wait, jump on in. You know, jump on in and ask questions after.
Well, look, I think our audience as well. I've been fascinated listening to these 5 people here this morning, all so successful in their own right. Thank you all very much for coming. Obviously, thanks to everyone in the audience. I'm going to hand back to you, of course. But just to say, I've been greatly stimulated. Thank you so much.
Just to perhaps hear from the floor if there are comments or questions to add to a really very fulsome discussion. Please feel free, and we have mics to add to that. And it may, in commerce tradition, come to me picking you out. Yes, Professor Andy Prothero.
I know what it's like to be you, Maeve, so I thought I'd ask the first question. I really, really enjoyed the presentations, and one of the things I think about in terms of our students is the introverts in our classes, and I know it's important to step out of that comfort zone, but for introverts who are like coming to something like this, they would really struggle and find it really difficult. And I wonder what advice you would give to them to not lose that, because I think it can be useful in business, and that there's a space for them in the business world or the humanitarian aid world as well.
I think it's very well said, and we'll build on that. May I add another question or two, and then I'll come to our audience, a question or comment. Yes, Paula. So Dr. Paula Carroll from our MIS department. And I'm hoping that some of our students might also have a question or two as well. So
Thank you very much indeed, Maeve. Yes, Paula Carroll from the MIS subject area. I really just wanted to say thank you for the plug, and I hope our students are listening. But really my question is, how do we link those technology skills with integrating the diversity that you talked about? How do we do all of that? Within 5 seconds, please.
So introverts, extroverts and diversity, and perhaps there's another comment and we'll turn to the panel then. Yes, I see Orla.
Yeah, assistant professor in entrepreneurship. So I'm very impressed, as just saying to Dermot here, to see the entrepreneurship flair and bent from the panel, and to hear you mention Frank's class as well, which I took myself when I was here. What I was going to ask was, I really am impressed with the think big, the work ethic, the inspirational stories that you're providing, and as someone who's teaching entrepreneurship, that's something that I can bring into the class as well. But I was wondering, there's a whole area of research on entrepreneurial, the wellness and mental health of entrepreneurs also. And I was wondering if you have any suggestions or tips or advice about achieving that balance between ambition and confidence and also well-being.
Well, thank you very much. And I think those are very strong connected themes. They're about difference. And please just jump in.
I'm going to jump in. So I was a workaholic apparently for 20 years and then not. And so I was on and then I was much more balanced. So my word to the students, the young entrepreneurs today, is about... So here's the thing. So we, by way of the devices that we carry in our pockets, we are being digitally distracted with respect all of the time. And we have this urgency addiction. So it comes down to this. Go into airplane mode. Put down the phone, turn off the iPad. Whatever it is that gives you some sense of balance, because our whole mental, emotional, nervous system is being, small a, inverted commas, attacked by our devices all day, every day. It is how we interact with ourselves, with our world, with the friends. And unless we find nature, or meditation, or breathing, or silence, or something that allows us to have a human rebalance, a human reset, the intensity and the speed at which things are happening and the degree of digital distraction and urgency is deeply affecting, I think, our ability to take the moment to have the creativity and the imagination and the ability to think all of those fundamental things that an entrepreneur still also needs to do, rather than being wired into this reactive world, which is fundamentally unhealthy.
So I'd love to take the introvert question, because I think that's a really good question. Actually, I've had feedback in my career, early in my career, that I was biased against introverts, which was true, I think, because I really like people on my team or meetings to be able to communicate coherently, punchy, summarize, and when they don't, I was getting frustrated. So I've had feedback and coaching over my career to be more inclusive with introverts. One thing at Facebook, there's a responsibility on companies, is to make sure there's a career track for different types of people. Because in so many companies, the career track when you get so good is become a manager, a leader of people, which typically leans a little bit more towards extroverts. Doesn't suit everybody. So in Facebook, you can get to the same level in terms of our leveling and pay, etc., as an individual contributor, for example, as you can as a manager. But the inclusion question is really interesting, because I mentioned we have 100 nationalities and how it's really hard. Introvert is one. I'll give you an example of another one that's really difficult. We have a lot of Middle Eastern people in the office, Arabs, right? And if you've ever watched, people speaking Arabic together, it looks almost aggressive. It looks like they're having an argument, right? I say it's Italians on speed, they're like kind of shouting and like this, and they could be just discussing the weather or whatever. And they come to work in a company like this, and they'll translate the language, but they can't change how they talk. And a lot of them have shared with me that they end up getting excluded from meetings, either completely or not asked, because manager people just think they're aggressive and don't want them in the room. So introvert's a good example, but there's so many other aspects of inclusion that goes beyond just gender or language or nationality or minorities. That's, as I said earlier, part of the challenge of having a more globalized, multicultural workforce.
But I suppose the question is, how do you help the students here in the lecture hall? How do you help them? And what do you do to make them willing to get their point across? Of course, not everybody is naturally have a disposition to stand up in a room with 300 people and speak. Hopefully, when they've something relevant to say, they'll be able to communicate that point. And I think that goes back to the future of learning. I think it is in the future of learning. Look, you have to be able to communicate since the dawn of time. And however, the onus is on the university with the facilities that you have here to make sure that you create those groups where you can start to draw ideas out of people, so people become more comfortable then when they leave this university to be able to express what they have to say. And I agree with Gareth, it has to be in a pithy fashion. If you can't get it out pretty quickly, people get bored. And so you do have to be able to get it out quickly, and that would be the onus, I would say, on the university to try and nurture those people and to bring them into settings that are not as intimidating as putting up your hand in front of 300 people, which I did in front of Geraldine, who's here actually, but that was way back when in an accounting lecture.
But thank you very, very kindly. Are there other questions or comments? Liam? And I see a couple there, and we'll begin with, this might be our last round. I'd love to hear a student voice.
Thanks, Maeve. It's sort of a two-part question. I don't know if any of you saw the Financial Times this Saturday, but there were two brilliant articles, and one was about the power of social media as a regulator. So it was talking about Equinox gyms and SoulCycle, Victoria's Secret, and the fact that they're really struggling now because their leadership had either associations with Jeffrey Epstein or what have you. So it's that power of social media to be a force beyond government that actually determines whether a company can sell its products in the new world. I'd be interested in your perspective on that. The other article was about the rise of the East India Company and the fact that ultimately it commanded armies and recruited politicians, and it was talking about the fact that in today's world the physical armies are replaced by lobbyists and the power of obviously huge companies to manage messages, particularly in the times of crisis. And it really is a question around the topical sort of issue of Apple at the moment, and how can we stop companies of power listening into our conversations and then managing a message around the outcomes of that, and particularly in the context of Facebook, the responsibility of power and how you regulate yourself. So it's a question around regulation.
They both feel directed at me, so I'm happy to take them. This feels like a typical dinner party for me, around the second bottle of wine. I mean, I agree with you to an extent in terms of the power of big companies, social media companies, Google, etc. Are they becoming too powerful? Are they new kind of railway companies and then banks or oil companies, etc.? It won't surprise you to hear I have a slightly more optimistic or defensive play on it. First of all, these are new technologies. Every new technology brings issues until it finds its level. I think controversies and things that are happening at the moment are making companies realize the downsides of technology and be more accountable, both themselves and no doubt through regulation. But I think ultimately it'll be society that helps them find their level. If you think, let's take Facebook at the moment and social media. Every new communications platform is incredibly controversial when it comes out, going right back to the printing press. Okay, we're in that, someone said, teenage stage at the moment. There's been lessons learned. There's downsides to it. Companies have to be much more accountable. There will and probably rightly be regulation. But there's also a societal trade-off to make. You know, consumers and people are ahead of companies and organizations and educational institutes and even regulators. Like, there's a trade-off to be made about how much information do I want to share for all the benefits, you know, of convenience, value, etc., notwithstanding the responsibility the companies need to have. I think what's happening now is ultimately going to be good. You know, as we come out of the teenage years, it's going to be good for, I was talking about virtual reality. And if you think people are anxious now, wait till that hits, okay? I mean, if you're a parent and you have anxiety about your kid on the phone or social media and all the rest of it, when VR and AR comes out into the streets in the community, it's going to be 10x what's here at the moment. But, you know, hopefully everything that's we're going through at the moment in terms of regulation and learnings, etc., is going to prepare us for that better. It's coming, right? You can't stop. You can't throttle progress in technology and innovation. So the best thing to do is just prepare for it. And finally, the thing I would always say to someone, and this is me a little bit point scoring, is we're very focused on the downsides of technology at the moment, you know, bullying, etc. And I think, you know, we've discovered a lot of things, you know, that we didn't know. But I would never allow people to forget the incredible positives as well. Even if you take social media, you take something like the hashtag MeToo movement. That was powered globally on Facebook and other social media. There's 90 million businesses on Facebook who couldn't afford to advertise or trade internationally before Facebook and Google and all these, and are now hiring millions and millions of people, you know, very underreported. Communities that are built on it. So I could go on for a long time about the positives, absolutely acknowledge the negatives that were unforeseen and we now need to be accountable for. But I'm optimistic that between companies' accountability, regulation, and society finding its level with it, that will come out the right side.
Well, thank you very, very much. I think we might begin to wrap. I see Vicky with a map, and just to say thanks, Liam Fitzgerald is the chair of our advisory board, so just to introduce Liam. And Vicky from Proudly Made in Africa.
Hi, thanks very much, Maeve. Just a question to all on the panel. Thank you for your contributions. It's been fascinating to listen to your success stories and how UCD played a role. I'm from a small NGO. We consult with a lot of businesses on how to implement the SDGs into their business plans and their way of thinking, and to really fulfil their responsibility to delivery of the SDGs. I suppose there's probably a little bit more on the downsides of things, but in your experiences, what is business role in social responsibility, or what is the corporate responsibility that you all have? We've heard a lot of talk about growth as a factor of success, but is it about bridling growth? Is it about waiting for the consumer to demand, or is it about anticipating what the consumer wants and then delivering it to them before there's a problem like massive climate change or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So yeah, just want to throw that out to the panel.
So thank you, Vicky, for bringing the Sustainable Development Goals into the room. And there may be members of the panel who would like to address this.
I think companies have a responsibility to sustainability, to do what's right for the environment in any business, to work with the community, to contribute to society in whatever business that we're in. And I think that's a very important for the employees going into businesses are asking those kind of questions. What is your CSR policy? What are you doing? How are you contributing? What are you giving back? And I think that all of that, Vicky, is really quite important and growing.
So the only danger of, you could have potentially a very large budget towards those things as a company, but then is it just the whims of the CEO that get satisfied rather than what actually is of a much more important issue for the country or the community that you're working in? And I think that's where you have to say, you come back to a more fundamental issue, and to be fair, the amount of money companies spend in CSR is irrelevant. There's a lot of noise made about it, but in fact it is tiny, because quite frankly, no shareholder will put up with it. That's the harsh reality of Wall Street. We're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and they will tell you, that's great, right? But I will give money to charity, not you. And so, say there are 2 points. One, okay, it could be the whim of the CEO, or two, shareholders will say, to a point, okay, but beyond that, no, we'll give the charity ourselves. So then it comes back to a much bigger societal issue about tax rates, because no one but the government can see the whole economy and see where resources need to be allocated. Is it appropriate that companies are taxed so low, or that they don't pay any tax at all, because you just keep pushing profits forward through capital expenditure? Is that the right thing? And is that a much more fundamental issue about, don't let the resources created by corporations be dictated by the interests of the CEO, but should we think about overall tax rates and how companies should have to pay some amount of cash tax? Because a lot of companies' tax rates may be 30%, 40%, 12%, but virtually no companies pay very little in cash taxes. And so then it falls to the consumer, the average person in the street, because the companies aren't paying cash taxes. There's a liability building up and a deferred tax liability over years to come. But I think that's, because it's a symptom for me of just since the financial crisis, the huge redistribution of wealth that has just favoured those who have had assets or had the ability to hold stocks and shares, etc. Anyway.
Thank you, Angus.
So it's a very good question. I'm going to add and extend. First half of my career was was building business, a lot of failure, some success, then a lot of more failure. And it was about building a business and the net worth, and got to a stage and sold the business. And then went to the other side, went to the light. And by my wife's doing, we set up a family foundation so it was about giving it away. And by the way, giving starts with giving of yourself, not giving of your money. And that's a whole other topic. So here's where I go. What gives me great hope and optimism is that there is way more people interested about business for good. And here I'm talking about what some term conscious capitalism, or whatever term, stakeholder capitalism was the term being used a week or two ago. So it picks up from where we're serving and only serving the best interests of the shareholder and or the investor. And now we're broadening it up to business as a holistic experience. And we're serving the supplier and what's best in the interests of our suppliers, and what's best and in the interests of our customers, and what's best and in the interests of our employees or team. Oh, and by the way, what's going to satisfy Wall Street and the quarterlies and the shareholders, all four. And so I say that this more holistic view of business is, frankly, I think, much more healthy. And also then you take it all the way through into NGOs, and NGOs trying to scrape for a slice of the small corporate social responsibility budget, or working with a company like PepsiCo that are pouring billions into the issue of water scarcity. Business for good. I could go on and I won't. If those that are interested, there's a whole list on Fortune of companies that are doing good in the world. So I'm hugely optimistic that we're shifting towards business for good, and it's not just about serving the shareholder and that financial gain. That's a very narrow one, but that's what a lot of business has been driven by. Going forward, it's opening up already.
I just add, that change is inevitable because it's been driven by employees. Employees are now increasingly going to be all millennials and Gen Z. They insist on that. Totally they want their personal values reflected, all that stuff about what's your CSR policy, your diversity, etc. There's no avoiding, even if a company wanted to be soulless and cold about it, there's no avoiding it. You wouldn't be able to hire anyone because that's the new profile of employee.
Well, thankfully, it's also, and I would really thank you all, thankfully it's, or perhaps, controversially, whatever way we choose to look at it, it is also the profile of the new student. Yeah. We have an ever more diverse student base. And at the heart of it, this space is all about students. The space we're in today, I suppose, is a beautiful auditorium which we chose to build in this way in order to make it more transparent, more of a space for dialogue as we're growing here. And the sorts of dialogues that will happen in this space include debates on business and society and sustainability. They include debates on the Sustainable Development Goals and tax in society with my colleague, Dr. Geraldine Doyle, Professor Geraldine Doyle. And they also, as has been so importantly, I suppose, signalled, Gareth, they also include, if we ask you during the course of your tour maybe to take a stop by with my colleague Audrey Dempsey and her team to look at the media suite and look next door at the Think Lab. They include virtual reality and exposing our students a little bit to some of the tech coming downstream. We'd love to add more. So, Gareth, we're open to business. And on that very point, I suppose this journey for us has been a journey of co-creation and collaboration. It has begun very much with the Moore family. And it began and ended there in the sense that the last few days for me have been, I think, Angela and I had a visit here last week, the first time in this space. It was very special. And I think it has been thinking again, remembering the story of George, which you heard so specially this morning. And thinking about George as a young, I'm now going to call him, if I may, Dr. George Moore, but actually call him a young fellow from Dundalk coming down here to do his BCom, meeting the extraordinary Angela. Can you imagine how fortuitous that would have been? And thinking about the journey that arose from that. And it is those collisions, those conversations, those connections that this space is all about. And in the end, sometimes that's about a big experience, the shared experience in a beautiful space like this. And sometimes it's out in the casual conversations over cups of coffee or the pints in the bar. But we wanted to more and more create the possibility of collision and collaboration and co-working out around the school. So as you venture out and as we draw this session to a close, I'd really invite you to explore this space. And as you flow out, you will recognise perhaps that on the ground floor, what we've created is a space for collaboration. And on the middle floor, we've created a space for active learning. And we have the George Moore Digital Collaboration Lab. Have a look there, and you might even spot in the glass the image of a young George, a student George, which I think will make us all smile. And then have a look at the top floor, and you'll see, on the one hand, a digital lab. You'll see, again, our beautiful Think space. And you'll see a media suite and a creator suite for those of our staff and students who are rapidly converting to webinars and podcasts and cutting their teeth, I suppose, on communicating in new and different ways. Sometimes that's being led by us, sometimes it's being led by our students, which is so exciting to see. And you'll also find next to that a quieter zone to, I suppose, slow down and connect with some of the mental health and just the time to think that we've all recognised as so important. And I hope you'll particularly notice our beautiful pollinator roof, which is a carpet of bees at different times. But I suppose all of that is just a canvas. But it's a beautiful canvas, and there are words that Angela used at an earlier stage when we were working on this campaign, where she said that, Angela, you said that what you were helping us with, and I particularly actually would also like to thank the corporate partners that have joined with us as well, and we're in the PwC Theatre now, but I would encourage you very strongly to go and visit the KPMG Skills Zone, which is going to be a very special space for students, and we'll be working with our first year and final year students to have different kinds of experience days there. And I'd also tell you about Mount Cabinet Trust, who have helped us to create a wonderful new entrepreneurship program for students of ours who wish to go and do their internship in a startup. How exciting is that? Or other students of ours who are being supported to go and do their internships with nonprofits and NGOs, just like Jane Ann or perhaps now Philip. And so we have, I guess, lots of different experiences for our students. But it comes back to what Angela remarked when we were, I suppose, building the campaign together, which is that this is a canvas. In the end, you said it's the skin and the bones. And it's for all of us together to put the heart into it. And we're so glad that you're here. There's generations here of leaders who've created this school, who I was privileged to be taught by, and members of the audience and panel also. But there's also new students who've just come in this year. We have scholarship students, we have student volunteers helping us, guiding and meeting people today, which is so valuable for your development and so important to our story. So we thank you all. We thank our colleagues, particularly today, and I hope that all of you together have heard things that have lifted your spirit and inspired you as you head in to a new academic year. We're terribly proud that you've joined us. We'd invite you to please explore the space, and there's coffees and teas and all sorts of refreshments. And for now, I would simply like to thank our panel very much.